Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition
that's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family.
Regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
It's too far to walk alone. You can't do it on your own. It's like bare hands digging through stone. And if things go down much steeper hills, even money won't pay these bills. But time is sure to show that people gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. Sometimes feels like I'm drifting a million miles from this planet. But what a shame it would be to look back on my life and realize that I've taken you and you for granted. People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. I can't see what's a mile around the bend. I do not know where this world is headed or where it may end. But you gave me this smile, so I threw away my frown. And I ain't gonna pick up, no you don't pick up what you just put down. People gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, signs along the way to remind us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. Our people gonna be okay. Storms never come to stay. They just show us how bad we need each other. How bad we need each other. And the trials of today, there are signs along the way to remind us how bad we need all who are low. Remember now that He will not leave us. We have no strength when we're on our own. We take our burdens and lay them down at the cross where hope is found. You lift our souls up from the grave. Only love like yours can save. Lead us down to rivers of mercy. Lead us down to your streams of peace. Restore in us a breath of creation. Awaken us a love that believes. We take our burdens and lay them down at the cross where hope is found. You lift our souls up from the grave. Only love like yours can save. You're just a word away, we'll say it, yeah, we'll say it. There's not a price to pay, you paid it, yeah, you paid it. You're just a word away, we'll say it, yeah, we'll say it. There's not a price to pay, you paid it, yeah, you paid it. We take our burdens and lay them down at the cross where hope is found. You lift our souls up from the grave. Only love like yours can save. We take our burdens and lay them down at the cross where hope is found. You lift our souls up from the grave. Only love like yours can save. Only love like yours can save. Only love like yours can save.
There are many ways we collaborate with each other to be the church we're called to be and to serve how we serve. And our contributing financially is one of the most important of those ways. If you want to help fund and sustain what we get to do together, go to crosspoint.org/contribute to see the many simple ways that you can do so. You can even text crosspointenc to 77977 to receive a link to get started now. Thank you for your partnership in the work we do together.
Hi everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to highlight that next week, scholar, theologian, and clinical psychologist Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes will be joining us at Crosspointe. She's going to come speak. Dr. Shaniqua is the author of some books, Sacred Self-Care, I Bring the Voices of My People, Too Heavy a Yoke, and she's considered a leading voice in the pursuit of social change and healing in the church. So we're looking forward to what she's going to bring. Hope that you'll be able to join us. Okay. Several years ago, during a message, I did a very scientific survey, and I asked people by show of hands how many people thought that people had become generally like inconsiderate and uncharitable, mean towards one another. And gosh, I think every hand in the place went up. And then I had the follow-up question, show of hands, how many of you think you are contributing to that? And it was like 4 hands and a lot of laughter. It's interesting how we know that there's a problem between us, but we find it harder to maybe identify where it lives. Like how we refer to ourselves as stuck in traffic, when reality is we aren't in traffic, we are the traffic. There's no traffic without us. So I want to talk a little bit about this today. We come back to ideas like this several times throughout the years because we want to keep building on it and we want to keep growing in this space. I don't know if you've noticed, but over the last couple of years, I feel like I've noticed a huge uptick in the frequency of this bumper sticker. Please be patient, new driver. Now, of course, there's a subtext here that, everybody's so impatient. In 1,000 years, archaeologists are going to find these stickers connected to rusty bumpers and determine correctly that we had some really short fuses. More directly, though, I'm seeing this as people making a direct request of strangers to do a little bit more work than they might otherwise do. Like, consider the car in front of you as being operated by a person. The silhouette in the driver's seat, this isn't an extra in your movie or an NPC in your video game. This is a living, breathing person. Very likely a young, inexperienced person who needs some consideration. So this bumper sticker is saying, please think of the human being driving, not just the actions you might not love. I've also noticed this lately. There are several companies now who provide adhesive QR codes for headstones or grave markers. And it's so that people can scan them with their phones and instantly be taken to a site where more context about the person's life can be learned, more than just the date of their birth and death that's recorded on the headstone. And so this is a way of honoring the picture of somebody's humanity, who they were, what they were like, what they pursued, who they loved, who loved them. And so it's this request of people to, please think of the richness of the human life represented here, not just the fact of their having been buried, not just that there's a headstone in front of you. About 25 years ago, I had a really nice discussion with a woman who was inviting me to consider working for her company. She was really sweet, really interested in me, and had these ideas about how my skills and interests were going to, be resonant with her company's goals. When I was done talking to her, I felt genuine excitement. Had some questions, but had some genuine excitement. Well, I was supposed to call in a few days and figure out what next steps were to see what I was thinking. She said, call me in 3 days. So I didn't. I admit I did not call on that 3rd day. And there was a legitimate reason, I forget what it was, but I did intend to call on the 4th day. But she called me before I had a chance to, that 4th morning, early. She leaves this message. Totally different tone. Like this get off my lawn annoyed energy. And the only line I remember from the message is, look, I haven't heard from you. Should I shelve you? Like, shelve me? It was such a strange feeling to realize I was no longer, or maybe had never been, a person with whom she had rapport. I was a category. I was a delete or keep file, an asset or an annoyance. I just needed to know, to scribble off my name. So I called and declined the position. It's not a great feeling, is it? To be reduced to something less than a real person, to be boiled down to either useful or useless, sort of neutral or in the way. It's an awful feeling, isn't it? Well, I should say here that I do this to people sometimes. I forget to make an effort to interact with the actual human being in front of me. I forget. They just become like a human-shaped placeholder. And sometimes I think that I'm doing it, and then I realize, no, you're not interacting with the person. You're interacting with your own invention. Like you're seeing the person, but this is your biases and assumptions that you're reading. And sometimes I think I'm actually getting it right, but then I forget to clearly communicate that I'm grateful to have been invited into such closeness. I sort of slip into these distracted dazes, something like an infant's lack of object permanence. And I think it leaves other people feeling uninteresting to me sometimes, or unseen. And I hate that. I hate that when that happens. So I would never use the phrase, but sometimes I think I feel people, I leave people feeling shelved. Maybe you can relate on one side of that or the other. Sometimes people would come up to Jesus and they would come to him from the margins, from the outer edge of society. They didn't put themselves there, they were put there, like the woman with a poor reputation that comes and puts oil on Jesus's feet, or people with years-long ailments that show up and, they're around socially, but people don't even know their names. They're just always over in the corner, and they come up to Jesus, or people impoverished by a disease, or maybe their deafness or their blindness, whatever it was, they come from the edges up to Jesus. Jesus receives them, includes them, heals them. And you get a sense from the other people in the scene watching that the story, one of the takeaways of the story, the feelings, is that they're all saying, wait, her? Those people? And it goes the other way too. It's not just for people out in the margins. Sometimes it's about people who do the pushing of people out in the margins. Like in Luke 7 or Matthew 8, Jesus heals the servant of a Roman centurion. I mean, this guy works for the problem. He's a higher up in the problem as well in the Roman Empire. This particular guy has a good reputation with the Jewish people, it says, but what he represents was problematic, to say the least. So Jesus heals this guy's servant, and then he turns to the crowd and he's like, this guy's faith is more solid than anybody else I've seen in Israel, which obviously didn't probably go over well. And it's like the whole story exists to make the reader say, wait a minute, him? There's a really great scene in Luke 9, this 1-2 punch. It goes like this. An argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and had him stand behind him. When he said to them, whoever welcomes this little kid in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For it is the one who is least among you who is the greatest. So right here, the disciples, the crowd, the reader, maybe even the kid, there's supposed to be this like, wait a minute, them? Kids? Like, I thought kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. What about the fact that kids, we love them, sure, but they're a hindrance to all the important stuff. Why are you putting them like at the top? Yeah, children are the future. Fine, we say that, but what we mean is in the future they'll be adults. That's when they're useful to us, right? So can we just get a babysitter for right now until the future shows up? But Jesus is like, no, look at this kid. I want you to understand, as you're arguing about who's the greatest and what can help you achieve greatness and all that stuff, the self-interest, I want you to look at them and realize that is not important to me. What's important to me, this is Jesus talking in my mind, is that you see what you previously did not see, that you actually notice what you've overlooked. And then the very next line, the punch 2 and the 1-2 punch is, Master, said John, we saw someone driving out demons in your name and we tried to stop him because he's not one of us. Which is hysterical. We saw this guy doing good to other people, but because he wasn't on our team, that seems like it was taking something away from us. And so we treated this guy like a problem for us more than we treated him as a solution for others. Wasn't that good, boss? Do not stop him, Jesus said, for whoever is not against you is for you. Which, as a tangent, how about that? Whoever is not against your faith, consider them on your team. You don't have to agree with them. They don't have to agree with you. If they're not opposing you, don't oppose them. That's pretty freeing, isn't it? So here's the pattern I'm trying to highlight. There's a preference in us, then and now, for seeing the complexity of our own lives and the lives of the people who are really close to us in our inner circle, but then an inability to see that same complexity in others that we've categorized as in some out group. So we're scandalized by Jesus, scandalized by the way of love, when those in the out group are either treated as in group before we've had a chance to approve, or they're propped up as this is the in group and you're the out group. That we can be scandalized that way too. Now I want to say, I think it's easy to think we understand all this, or we already have this resolved in sort of an abstract theological way. I can imagine many of you are like, I've heard these stories. I know that. Like, the last shall be first, the first shall be last. I get it. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. I get it. But where this continues to live, and the reason we keep coming back to ideas like this multiple times a year, It's not because it lives in the formulations of our theology necessary, and not in the big extremes like the us, them, national, allies, and enemies stuff. It's more in the day-to-day, in our unexamined thinking about the real-life people we don't realize we're not seeing, that we don't know or understand. And one of the best ways I've ever had this framed for me comes from Richard Beck, who he expands on Peter Singer's term, the moral circle, to describe sort of our default setting. And so Beck puts it this way. I use the following scenario in my classes to illustrate the nature of the moral circle. Imagine I ask my students that your best friend just got a job waiting tables at a restaurant. To celebrate with her, you arrange with friends to go to the restaurant to eat dinner on her first night. You ask to be seated in her section and look forward to surprising her and later leaving her a big tip. Soon your friend arrives at your table, sweating and stressed out. She's having a terrible night. Things are going badly and she's behind getting food and drinks out. So I ask my students, what do you do? Easily and naturally the students respond, we'd say, don't worry about us, take care of everyone else first. I point out to the students that this response is no great moral struggle. It's a simple and easy response, like breathing. It is just natural to extend grace to a suffering friend. Why? Because she is inside our moral circle. But imagine, I continue with the students, that you go out to eat tonight with some friends and your server, whom you vaguely notice seems stressed out, performs poorly. You don't get good service. What do you do in that situation? Well, since this stranger is not part of our moral circle, we get frustrated and angry. The server is a tool and she's not performing properly. She is inconveniencing us. So we complain to the manager and refuse to tip. In the end, we fail to treat another human being with mercy and dignity. Why? Because in a deep psychological sense, this server wasn't really human to us. She was part of the backdrop of our lives, part of the teeming anonymous masses toward which I feel indifference, fear, or frustration. The server is on the outside of my moral circle. That's helpful and hard, isn't it? Notice in the scene, it's the same setting, it's the same service, it's the same restaurant, it's the same experience in almost every way except the way in which the experience is being framed, because you know the server, and you have the understanding that comes with knowing the server, or you don't know the server. That's the only difference. It's not that one person is mentally capable of being gracious and considerate and understanding, but this person isn't. This person's genetically disposed to it, and this person isn't. God made me a kind person. God did not make you a kind person. It's a choice. It's a choice I am making, even if I don't realize I'm making it, based on my willingness to consider the fuller story of another person, the way I naturally do for somebody within my circle. It's a consideration that naturally happens within the circle, but we forget to apply to others because our circle is too small. See, and we know this. This is why when my kid gets cranky, he needs a nap, but when your kid gets cranky, he's a brat. This is why the way you vote is evil and uninformed and selfish and stupid, but the way I vote, it's rooted in my values and it's well considered. It's why that customer who left that terrible review was completely unreasonable and rude and nuts. And the mere mention of her name around the office makes all the employees roll their eyes every time she comes up. But the best friend of that customer is proud she stood up for herself instead of just rolling over, and thinks the review was brilliantly stated, but maybe didn't go far enough. See, it's not so much what people are doing or not doing, the conclusions they're coming to or not coming to. That's not chiefly what's shaping our behavior, our disposition towards people. It's whether or not we've done the work of seeing them more than, quote, not really human to us, part of the backdrop of our lives toward which we feel indifference, fear, or frustration. I'm convinced that beyond the literal healing of blind eyes, that Jesus is portrayed as perhaps more than any other condition, healing blindness. I'm convinced that it's because of the figurative sense, that our problems with love and peace and joy and justice are remedied by our learning to see each other, not as others, but as myself. I am you and you are me. South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu's words about what happened in Jesus' day and how it speaks to us and invites us now, they're really beautiful. I want to share these with you. He said, Jesus came into a deeply divided and polarized society. There was the divide between the hated foreign oppressor and the citizens of the vassal state. Within Judaism, there were different religious groupings, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots. There was the divide between the Jew, the Gentile, and the Samaritan. And then men were segregated from women. There were free persons and there were slaves. There were the rich, there were the poor. The world saw a veritable miracle unfolding before its very eyes as all sorts and conditions of women and men, rich and poor, slave and free, Jew and Gentile, all these came to belong in one fellowship, one communion. They did not regard one another just as equals. That in itself would have been a huge miracle. No, they regarded one another not just as equals, but as sisters and brothers, members of one family, God's family. It's almost grade school there at the end, isn't it? Everybody's one family. We're all God's children. Like somehow if we just agree to that, it'll solve all of our problems. But I want to invite you to come to it as a Christian who's familiar with the language, or a mystic, or any religious tradition, or just as much come to it as an atheist or somebody that's like, I don't know what I am. I don't care about labels anymore. Or as a sociologist or a biologist or a quantum physicist, and you can be multiples of those things, by the way. You don't have to just pick one. No matter how we approach the idea of humanity being one family, it's still the fundamental truth of the human experience. We are all one thing disguised as many different things. That is a spiritual claim as much as it's a scientific fact. The sense of other human beings being cataloged in our minds as other than myself, separate from myself, it's mostly an illusion. And what Jesus' people have done from the beginning, when they've been at their best, is recognize and live into this truth. All people are family. We're all one thing. However unique each of us are, you are what I am what you are. But that's not our default, is it? The default that we seem to have if we don't awaken to reality is that, sure, there's billions of unique human beings on earth, but humankind ceases at the border of the tribe. My circle contains the real people. And some are family and some are friends, and as time has gone on and I've gotten older, I've moved some out and others in. But everything outside that circle is something less than a person. And it's not, they're the villains and we're the heroes. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. It's nothing grandiose like that, which would be nice if it was just that clear. Way before it gets on that level, it's simply a matter of who we naturally and reflexively apply grace and understanding to. And then outside of that, those for whom we feel indifference, fear, or frustration. But with eyes to see and ears to hear, the circle expands. And so then naturally expands our compassion, our acceptance, our charitableness, our forgiveness, our kindness. That's a helpful word to pop the hood on, because the word kind has the word kin right in it. It's where the word comes from. Kindness, when I express kindness to somebody, among other things, I'm saying I am slowing down to see you and I for who we really are. Not two things, but one thing. And there was a brief season where this just felt really natural for us when we were infants. Because when you're an infant, it never occurs to you that there are other human beings. It's all just one thing. Maybe you notice you can pass a newborn around. They don't have stranger anxiety yet. They don't freak out when you pass a newborn around. But by the time we're toddlers, that changes. By the time we're toddlers, we're already super suspicious. You ever see a toddler enjoying himself and you squat down and you say, "Hey buddy, cool truck," and the look on their face completely changes. Like, you are Satan, where's my mom? It's because the circle of trusted family, of my tribe, it gets tight really quick. And it wants to stay that way. And this has obvious survival benefits. But if we don't learn how restricted we can be by our moral circle, well beyond it having any survival benefit to us, it will stay that way the rest of our lives. We'll grow into adults whose hearts are full of love, but whose eyes can't see most other people as being where all that love is supposed to go. And not because they're evil or bad necessarily. It's just because we don't see them. We don't recognize them as having all the complexity and depth and need for consideration as I do, or as my own child does. I mean, Thanksgiving is coming. How many of us have family members that we just feel tense about already? But they'd do anything for anyone. they're such loving people. They'd do anything for anyone as long as they know them. But they render so many other people as something else. The people that they hear about on the news, people from that city or whatever, they've heard about them in some way, and they've deduced that there's something less to themselves. And it's so frustrating. But then how many of us do this exact same thing? We just do it toward a different group of people. I mean, maybe you do it toward the family members I'm talking about. So this might be a great way of diagnosing the world as we find it. It's full of people whose hearts are full of love. Of course they are. We're all made in the image of love. But our eyes don't consistently see the humanity of other people in order to give them that love. Because to allow yourself to see them, to have your moral circle drawn around them, man, does it complicate and slow everything down. When we draw our moral circle around other people that it's not currently around, we're consenting to far more complexity. That's probably why we resist it. It's so much easier just to see actors, non-human agents, human-shaped collections of behaviors that we either agree with or disagree with. And then we just stop at that interpretation. But once they come into my moral circle, it might be better to say once I stop excluding them from where they naturally are, their human kin. So once I see them as part of my moral circle, I recognize them as the same as me, not other than me. They're part of me and I am part of them. Once I accept them as the kin that they always were, well, my heart begins the work of unothering them. Hey, that's me. Just a different backstory, different shoes, But that's exactly who I'd be if I were in your position. Those are the conclusions I probably would have come to. Or that's a conclusion I could come to in just 2 weeks of being you. But that feels like way more work to do that. And maybe it's more accurate to say it's not so much more work, it's just more intention, which feels like more work in the same way as switching off autopilot feels like more work. Because you're consenting to slow way down and embrace the complexity of people and to offer in your mind acceptance for this person rather than, mindless snap judgments. You're saying, I'm going to pause and acknowledge that I don't actually know anything about them. And your culture will give you a trophy for labeling people as fast as possible. So it's a huge feat to say, wait a minute, let me remember that I don't actually know anything about those people, this person. I'm going to slow down with intention, and I want to notice. And this is prayer, this is meditation, this is mindfulness, noticing. Noticing deeply with compassionate imagination and open curiosity that someone that I may have previously only half noticed but been fully irritated by, or half noticed like you half notice a stop sign on your way to something else, like, I think I acknowledged it, but I don't really remember. Noticing, slowing down to notice, because you will not notice and therefore cannot encircle and therefore cannot extend kindness to unless you do. And when you do, now I see and receive this person with kindness and grace and willingness to understand, no longer as other than myself, but as kin, as part of myself, I of them, them of me. So practically speaking, as I wrap this up, maybe you feel frustrated sometimes that you're not a more loving person by now, that you don't have more loving feelings in your heart. Other people grew up and became so lovely and so sweet. Maybe you've got people like that in your life, but you're not that. So let me tell you right now, don't beat yourself up. This is so often me. I feel like such a jerk sometimes. And I'm not trying to be funny, and I'm not going to beat myself up, in your place or as, a pretense of solidarity. I'm just being honest. I just want to admit at this point in my late 40s, I was really hoping to have become somebody that I would describe as effortlessly kind. But sometimes I think I've only mastered the effortless part. It comes and goes, but generally I have not become what my prayers for decades have requested. That doesn't come naturally for me. But here's what I want to say to all of us, because it's something I can do and it's something I think you can do. Whether you think of yourself as trying to mature in the faith, or if it's just a matter of trying to become a better person, don't think of yourself as trying harder to be a loving person or to become a less mean person. Because I'm convinced at this point that trying to become a more loving and less mean person, it just generally leads to frustration and more self-loathing. And then that leads to pretending to be someone else. We don't need any more spiritually minded people pretending to be other people. Think of yourself instead as getting better and better at noticing people more and more deeply, becoming more and more aware of the truth that our moral circle can be as big as encompassing as we want in any moment. At any moment, we can look at a human being and say, hang on, let me pause. Beyond what I find agreeable or useful or comprehensible or not, that is my kin. I am their kin. That is part of myself. This is a human sibling. This is a kin, a sibling within the kingdom of God. Before any other consideration or label, that's who this is in front of me. And if that were my child or my best friend, I would see far more than the human-shaped thing serving as the, again, backdrop of my life toward which I might only feel indifference, fear, or frustration. I might not consistently feel the loving, radiant kindness that comes so easily for like my own kid, but I can pause and I can employ the gentle discipline of noticing. And from that noticing, that awareness, those opened eyes, I am in that moment fully offering kindness and peace and compassion and love. It's the same stuff. So, strange as it may seem for a church who's on record as being very much pro-love, let me offer a benediction this way. Rather than trying to be more loving, may we instead agree to being more aware, drawing wider and wider circles where, best we are able, anonymous strangers are held like immediate kin until the kindness and consideration of Christ mark my day-to-day life. Amen.
If you would like to know more or get connected to Crosspointe, go to crosspointenc.org. If you're in need of care or assistance, go to crosspointe.org/care. And welcome home.